Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going through the absolutely asinine reaction from the political and media class when it comes to adolescence. Because I have covered the show before in a previous video, and generally I would actually recommend the show. I think it's actually very well written and tells a compelling story if you look at it in isolation. If you're politics brain like everyone on this channel though, I understand why there's such a visceral reaction to it, and we're going to go through why the reaction is absolutely moronic. So first things first, I do want to cover something that I did not go through in my last video because I didn't have enough information to actually go through it, but as it turns out, there was a charity that helped fund the production of Adolescence, and it's called Tender. And on the very same day that Adolescence was released on Netflix, they had a special screening at Soho Hotel with over 40 people from organisations working to end violence. The drama shines a light on online misogyny and its dangerous impact on young people today. And personally, I don't think it did a very good job of that, the show. I thought it was quite a bit more nuanced than that. More showing that boys really don't have an idea of what their role and place is in the world, especially when they're 14 years old. Online conversations were certainly touched upon, and internet terms like red pill and blue pill obviously came up, and they didn't have bad descriptions. And the show didn't exactly disprove internet talking points like the 80-20 rule, 80% of women go after 20% of men. They don't at all try and debunk that whatsoever, which is what made me think the show was actually quite nuanced. However, from everything that's going on around it, it's like that's not what they think they made. They think they made the greatest show ever that's going to stop boys stabbing each other. The show isn't really trying to aim to do that, from what I can tell. The main thing it's trying to do is effectively scare kids straight. The best message it has is that if you do commit a heinous act of violence, it's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect the entire community around you, your family, your friends, teachers, all future prospects as well. But as we'll go through, the conversations around this really don't make it out that this is what the show was about, which is why an awful lot of people have a completely bad idea of what the show is actually about. Because the writer's going around a bit like Paul Verhoeven saying that Starship Troopers was about how fascism is bad, and then it has basically nothing about how fascism is bad. Anyway, Tender CEO Susie McDonald MBE joined Adolescence co-creator Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne and producer Joe Johnson to explore their motivation for the series and action that they hope it would inspire. A specialist in healthy relationships education, Tender strives to prevent violence and abuse before it starts with innovative programs that embed positive values like equality while challenging the dangerous rhetoric so present in young people's lives. Yeah, as you can tell, what's the answer to stopping boys stabbing each other? Oh, just more of the same. And this is my big problem with this whole thing. The whole conversation around Adolescence could be incredibly interesting, but everyone who is involved in its production, apart from Steve and Graham, is absolutely screwing it up and making it look like a complete mess. Anyway, as mentioned, they did work with the production team on Adolescence, so the CEO said, "We are proud to work with Adolescence team on this powerful, important production. Adolescence is a dynamic portrayal of the troubling attitudes spreading through our school and horrific impact they can have. As Adolescence so aptly illustrates, this is impacting both boys and girls as well as their families and communities." Again, I'm not exactly sure how much the show was actually showing the troubling attitudes were widespread. It showed that they were all certainly aware of it. But the fact that two main themes, especially in episode 2, the school episode, were that women teachers have massive trouble controlling and understanding teenage boys, and female bullying is rife on social media and can cause boys to have pretty bad emotional reactions to that, seems to go over absolutely everybody's head. Like, you know, it's not excusing the murder by any stretch of the imagination, but it is clearly trying to say that female bullying online will have an impact on boys and not a good one, as it always has. But again, it's just completely ignored. It's just, oh, the attitudes in young boys is horrific. Yeah, well, this reaction is not going to help that because they already feel like the world is against them. Do you really want to make them feel more like that? Young people are being bombarded with harmful content, and too many are left without skills to understand the challenge these beliefs. Yeah, well, it's not just the young boys who don't have these skill sets, it's an awful lot of adults as well, such as yourself. You aren't challenging this at all. This is the problem. All Tender is trying to do here is up their profile to effectively get more donations and, as we'll go through in a few minutes, government grants too. Our young people are at serious risk and it's time to take action. Big problems demand big solutions. We call on our government to support our schools and our communities, ensuring that every child has access to high-quality expert RSHE, which is relationships and sex education. Which, again, as we'll go through, the answer to all this is to explain to boys that hating women is bad. I don't think that's going to particularly help. They're already bombarded with that. I think doing more of the same isn't going to particularly help. Anyway, if you want absolute proof that this is nothing but trying to raise Tender's profile after working on this production, the very last paragraph is basically telling people how they can get in contact with the CEO for media interviews. The problem with all this is that it's just very transparent to me how little these people actually care about solutions and only care about upping their own profiles. I think it's pretty grim. And I think it really undermines the whole point of the show. The messages in the show aren't particularly bad. The conversations around the show are absolutely crazy. Again, I can only compare it to Starship Troopers and Paul Verhoeven. It would be far from the first time that a show has completely different messages to what everyone in the production team says it's about. And honestly, the only person who seems to talk any sense on this whole thing is Stephen Graham, because he's a man who just wants to stop boys stabbing and is self-aware enough to realise that he doesn't have all the answers. Everyone else, though, they think they're the messiah when it comes to saving boys. What's their answer? Well, we'll go through it in a second. But first I just want to mention I found most of this information through Charlotte Gill, who I recommend everyone follows on Twitter because she is incredibly talented at finding basically the entirety of the leftist network that run most of our media and frankly our country. And she points out here that Tender received £3.4 million in taxpayer funding from 2020 to 2024, and that includes government grants, which are just the government gives you money because we think you're doing good stuff, and then direct government contracts. And this is a relationship and sexual health charity, and yes, I would not be shocked if part of that income from the contracts was to directly work on adolescence, but I don't think we have enough information to say that yet. However, it's clear that there is an intertwined relationship between, at the very least, the production team at Netflix and Tender. Whether the government directly funded Tender to be the consultants for it, I do not know. Anyway, now on to one of the big reasons that I made this video. This tweet from UK Prime Minister Twitter account. Now streaming Netflix's Adolescence for free in secondary schools across the country. Now, I think I need to make one thing clear. Last video on this, I did say that if you are going to show any Netflix series about knife crime, it's probably not the worst one, because a couple of the episodes are effectively there to tell you how bad a consequence you will face and your family will face if you do commit knife crime. However, I still think it's a stupid idea to show this sort of thing in school because I don't think it helps anything beyond maybe putting people off who may or may not commit knife crime. But at the end of the day, you're treating kind of one of the fifth order effects rather than the core of it, which is obviously the crisis of masculinity. Anyway, it came along with a 2-minute video, so let's take a look.
Hello. Nice to see you. How are you? Good to see you again.
Thank you for having us.
No, very good. You know what it's like on the inside. Most people don't. They sort of think it's going to be small, and then it's always much bigger. But come on in.
I don't know what it is about Keir Starmer, but even when he's supposed to be acting like a normal human being, he just can't do it. Anyway, one rather large thing I noticed here is that they filmed it like an episode of Adolescence. They did one long shot for this entire promo, and all it's there to do is to try and show off, oh, the Prime Minister's doing something about it. Look, Adolescence will be shown free in secondary schools across the country, and there's very little reason to do that other than it's popular. He invited the show's creators, charities and young people to talk about the issues raised in the series. Again, I highly doubt they are going to talk about female bullying of young boys and female teachers having trouble with teenage boys and controlling them effectively and disciplining them. Our young people deserve to be safe in communities. Well, guess what? Adolescence doesn't have the answers to that. And then a quote from the Prime Minister from another tweet. He had, it hit home hard apparently. He sees his son as someone who could stab a woman. So that's not exactly a great thing to say about your own son. Anyway, screw this, I'm skipping to the end.
Thank you very much for being here. In a minute we're going to bring the media in, but before we do, I just wanted to say, let's start talking about this.
I want to know who wrote this script. Typically, if I have a room full of people, of showrunners who made this show that everyone's talking about, before you get into serious business, when you say, first I just want to say, what a great show you made, or something like that, that would have made much more sense than just saying, okay, first I want to say, before the media come in, let's just talk about this. What? It's very irritating at this point, and I suppose we may as well get into it now, how there's been cries and cries and cries for the government to do something about grooming gangs. And there has been cries to do things about knife crime, to be fair, and it appears that the answers are just hollow. What they're going to do? Oh, we're going to throw out Netflix for free to all secondary schools, to, specifically to show this 4-hour show. And it's just completely hollow. As I say, the best thing it will do for some people is scare them into not wanting to stab other people. Fine, I think that might work on maybe 10 people in the country. But realistically, look at what's going on here. Effectively, we are happy as a government to fund an American tech firm, a media platform, to show a load of boys a pretty decent TV show, but one that isn't exactly fully educational beyond some psychological concepts and what happens to you if you're charged for murder. And why this annoys people is because they're happy to... I assume Netflix wouldn't have done this for free. This probably cost millions to the government. But they're happy to do that, but not put the effort and money into, well, a nationwide inquiry into the grooming gangs, which would be much more effective than any private one, since the government-backed one can actually compel witnesses and, just actually investigate the thing properly, let's say. And this is why there's been memes going around saying, oh, clearly we need someone to fund a Netflix show about grooming gangs, or we need to fund a Netflix show about the disasters of the economy or something like that, because apparently that's how you get this government to actually do anything. And I've said this for some time, and the Tories definitely had this issue for 14 years as well, but all they do is react to the media. What's the media been talking about for the past couple of weeks? Oh, Adolescence an awful lot, isn't knife crime terrible? Well, yes, I suppose. So what are you going to do about it that you've not already done? Oh, we're going to ban ninja swords? Okay. How many people are stabbed by ninja swords? Not many. What are you actually doing about the problem of teenage boys wanting to kill people? Oh, nothing much. Realistically, it's like just stifle their access to weaponry. They will still manage to find weapons. Right. Axel Rudakabano was 17. He was not able to actually purchase a knife, and yet he still managed to do it via, well, going around age restriction laws by pretending to be someone else. Okay, you try and deal with that. Effectively, you're just playing policy whack-a-mole, and all it ends up doing is making everyone's lives worse. You don't deal with root issues such as putting people who act on violent tendencies straight into prison for years, then yeah, you're going to end up with a country that everyone despises living in. To the point, again, where I have to say, basically everyone I know between the ages of 20 and 40, to some degree want to leave the country. Anyway, Keir Starmer then tweeted this out. The challenges raised by adolescents aren't something we can simply legislate for. If I could pull a lever to solve it, I would. You actually can legislate for it. As I say, just stick these people in prison and make schools a hell of a lot more interesting, and encourage more of a free world that, boys will want to explore. It's only by listening and learning from experiences of young people and charities that we can tackle this, and this is what I've been doing today. Sorry, that's what governments have been doing successively for decades. It's made the problem worse. No, we need different action here. Rather than funding Netflix, who announced from today, we are making Adolescence available in all secondary schools across the UK through Interfilm Plus, which I assume is another streaming service. Additionally, Healthy Relationships charity Tender will produce guides and resources for teachers, parents and carers to help navigate conversations around the series. Oh my god, don't do that. Again, these are charities that have been driving the conversation for some years at this point, and it just... I'm not being funny, but when I remember my classes like this in school, I just remember them being quite cringe, and all it did was confuse me further. I think this is just going to end up with more confusion. Anyway, details of this meeting were on the BBC. Jack Thorne, who wrote the show with actor Stephen Graham, recently said the Prime Minister should rather urgently consider a smartphone ban in schools and a digital age of consent. Now, the smartphone ban in school I've been a supporter of for some years at this point. Digital age of consent. I like the idea of it. I think it's fine to ban under 16s from social media. I just think it's going to be one of those things that's basically impossible to enforce, and it's basically something that has to be dealt with the parents. Australia have it, apparently, which has passed a law banning children under 16 from using social media. Thorne and producer Joe Johnson gave their views to Secure at Monday's meeting, along with charities including the NSPCC and Children's Society and Young People. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy was also there. Oh my god. She was the woman who said the culture wars are over, by the way. They've managed to, again, veer Hoven this whole thing. They have turned a show that is actually relatively nuanced and well written, and all the conversations around it do not reflect what's actually in the show. The Prime Minister told them the show was at times harrowing, but had lit a touch paper under the debate. Touch paper under the debate about the issue. We've been watching with our children. My boy is 16, girl 14, and I have to say I found it really hard, he told BBC political editor Chris Mason. It was also arresting, he said, because in a sense, what happens in the drama could really happen anywhere and almost happen to any child. I don't know how much I agree with that one. Theoretically, yes, it could happen with any child. However, speaking statistically at the very least, it's a lot more likely to happen with, I don't know, children who don't have fathers. Whether they died or left doesn't really matter. The statistics show that, well, fatherlessness is pretty badly effective on boys, and that's not a good thing. But having said that, anecdotally, I do know of cases where stabbings have happened, people have died, and the boy did have a father, so, I suppose statistically, sure, but, the exceptions do obviously exist. So Starmer then goes on to say that he's not going to bother with a legal requirement to ban phones in schools, because apparently 97% of schools are already doing that, so it's not on his mind, or not to his mind, the central issue. Fair enough. If we're going to get to grips with this, I personally would much rather we focus on what I think is the real issue, which is, whether you're at school or elsewhere, what are you actually accessing? Because that, for me, is the critical issue, he said. And whether it's at school or elsewhere, there's material that clearly shouldn't be accessed. Again, I think the accessing is a bit of a misnomer. Don't get me wrong, I'm on the side of age restriction, or, parents should be restricting their kids from the online world to some extent. I know my parents did. But at the end of the day, if your reaction to all this is to not try and address what the boys' problems actually are and why they're finding some online material rather engaging, you're just going to end up making the problem a hell of a lot worse. Because these boys are still probably going to bring up these problems in the classroom, and you basically don't have an alternative answer to this. And frankly, they'll probably instinctively end up with similar answers to, well, stuff they're seeing online anyway. Such as, say, the Manosphere or Andrew Tate, or things like this. Because what else is your logical conclusion to, I am being told one thing, but instinctively I know that's all wrong? As I say, I remember having these thoughts in school, and the internet was not like it is today. If anything, it was more of a Wild West, but the Manosphere really didn't exist back then like it does today. Anyway, the government has pointed to measures including the Online Safety Act, and this is where this is all going to go absolutely pear-shaped. Because the Online Safety Act is a act that has managed to shut down a completely innocent hamster forum because they did not have enough mods to actually stop quote-unquote harmful material actually being posted on their forum, so they couldn't guarantee it, and so instead of risking going to court or anything like that, they just shut the hamster forum down. I'm not even joking. The Online Safety Act effectively makes it illegal to go online full stop, because like the Malicious Communications Act, it's so poorly written that technically everything on the internet is illegal. So it says social media companies will have to protect children from harmful material, including porn, material promoting self-harm, bullying, and content encouraging dangerous stunts. Again, this is kind of annoying me because all of this stuff have been issues before the internet even existed. Bullying's been ubiquitous everywhere. Porn's existed everywhere. Granted, it's definitely not as easy as it used to be to access it today. People self-harmed in the past. Hell, there was a whole epidemic in the 90s of people going bulimic. Women mainly, I should say. Didn't do that inspired by the internet, did they? Platforms will be expected to adopt age assurance technologies to prevent children from seeing harmful content. And again, I would be fine with that. The problem is that this is almost definitely an open door to try and, well, stop online anonymity. And I kind of rely on that. So the government has also updated its guidance on teaching relationship section health education at school. The Times recently reported that it would include lessons to counter misogyny and the growing appeal of influencers such as Andrew Tate. I think Andrew Tate's influence has peaked, to be quite honest with you. Again, a big issue with all this that I even mentioned to my mum was, well, the show's kind of 5 years, 10 years too late. Andrew Tate's popularity's sort of going downhill now. He was definitely an issue with teenage boys a few years ago. I kept hearing it from teachers and things like that. But boys seem to have largely moved beyond Andrew Tate because he only really had about 2 weeks worth of things to say. Plus the fact he's going to court in Romania and, well, in many other countries for charges including rape, human trafficking and beating women did actually tend to put some boys off. Well, a lot of boys, to be honest. Anyway, Thorne, the man who wrote the show along with Stephen Graham, said that the meeting was brilliant. The brilliant thing was that it wasn't about us. It was about facilitating conversations with charities and youth groups who really understand what's going on. If they understood what's going on, this wouldn't be a problem and you would not have to make the show. Don't be ridiculous. All the government's done is, right, what the Tories did on this issue, but, ramp it up 10 times. That's what they're doing, and that didn't help when it was 10 times smaller. So when it's 10 times bigger, you might actually exacerbate the problem. And I hope the solution can be found to this problem. The success of Adolescence has helped those charities and groups get the opportunity to have conversations that they haven't had before and that they should have had. And that might lead to policy change and things being made better for our young people. Again, I want to make it absolutely clear. I keep comparing this to Paul Verhoeven and Starship Troopers because it's uncanny how exactly the same things are happening, except this time we're actually getting policy out of it. So what I mean by that is, can you imagine if Starship Troopers came out and then all of a sudden Keir Starmer started saying, I'm going to have anti-fascism training in schools, and Paul Verhoeven is going to be seen with me in photo opportunities every now and then, and he's going to go on about fascism again. And then you actually end up getting these anti-fascist policies put in. And then you have people like me who frankly have media literacy and say, hang on, there's absolutely nothing fascist in here. Because I'll say again, the misogyny in the show, it largely came out in episode 3 when the boy was being psychoanalyzed. And the only real misogyny I saw there was in one of his final lines in that episode where Jamie says to the social worker effectively, I think I'm better than other boys because other boys will have killed her but they'll have molested her first. I didn't do that, I'm better than them. Really seeing the woman as basically nothing more than a sex object and thinking other people think she's a sex object. And let's be real here, that there's definitely an issue where it's a timeless issue, bear in mind as well. It's not just the modern world, but there is an issue with the human condition that some men do just see women as little more than, well, I'm not going to be too pejorative about it, so just sex objects. It's definitely the case that does exist. And as I say, it's timeless. I don't think showing this in school is going to necessarily help that. I'm not saying the girls are particularly sexualised in it. However, I don't think it particularly addresses that to any great extent, and not only that, but there's so many other things in that show where, effectively, the women can't do too much about the boys. I think I saw it in Archie's video on this, actually. The final scene where Stephen Graham, the dad, has a teary moment to himself saying that he failed his own son. He mentioned that, well, the mother doesn't think she did anything wrong, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it. We all kind of agree on this side of the internet that boys do need a father figure to some extent. The reason for that is because, frankly, women aren't great with teenage boys. It's just a fact of life. Effectively, a mother is best at disciplining their children if she tells them, your father will hear about this. I know that threat was used against me when I was a teenager. So saying, did the mother do her part? It's like, well, she probably did what she could, but the onus really is on the man more than the son. And I'm not saying that this was a real thing. This was obviously a drama, but it's probably, well, it definitely is a truism that, there are bad fathers. Well, not necessarily bad. He wasn't necessarily a bad father, but there are fathers who fail their sons to some degree. And I don't think it's a bad thing to acknowledge that, along with everything else the show acknowledges. As I say, it's fairly nuanced. But, well, is there anything about being a father figure in here? No. Not really. It's just train kids not to be misogynistic. Great. How are you going to do that? Show them the show and, I don't know, more feminism. That's what we need. We've got to a point where my own mum said that feminism might have been a mistake. I'm not even joking about that. That kind of shocked me. And, well, it might have implications for voting patterns in the future. We'll see. Anyway, at this point, I want to go through Jack Thorne, who obviously was the professional writer for the show, and I get the feeling Stephen Graham was honing in stuff he wanted to put in the show, because things he's talking about, as I say, it's like Paul Verhoeven. It's just not reflective of what the show was actually about. So the younger me would have sat up and nodded, Adolescence writer Jack Thorne on insidious appeal of incel culture. Again, I know some unironic incels. They're simply not the violent type. I think it's a red herring to go on about incel culture. And again, this probably is just largely an issue of people who have clear violent tendencies that they are acting upon probably should be separated from society, even if they're 12. So after getting called up by Stephen Graham to help write the show, he enthusiastically got involved and suggested that they write it together. They didn't know why Jamie, the perpetrator of the attack, did it, but they knew he wasn't a product of abuse or parental trauma, but we couldn't figure out a motive. Then someone I work with, Marielle Johnson, said, "I think you should look into incel culture." Okay, this is really changing my perspective on the show, to be honest with you. It's remarkable how when they started making this, they couldn't come up with a motivation for the crime. Which kind of goes to show how little they actually understand the larger issues around knife crime. Motivations are usually quite easy to, well, see. Typically in London, it's to do with gang violence. I suppose that can be true in other large cities, but a lot of the rest of the time, unironically, mental health issues do play a part in it sometimes. And other times it's just because the kids are pure evil. The Brianna Jai thing, as much as everyone wants to make that about transphobia and things like that, no. Brianna Jai was stabbed because the two people just wanted a target. They were happy to stab anyone. And again, it's a problem that we saw with Axel Ruda-Cabana. Obviously he stabbed some girls multiple hundreds of times, frankly, and that was an absolutely horrific episode. But absolutely nobody could actually nail down what his actual motivations were. And again, I think it's because it's the simplest thing. I think he's just pure evil and just like the idea of stabbing, and girls are easy targets. And I think there are just some people like that. And when it comes to the incel culture inspiring murders, yeah, maybe there are some examples like that. But anecdotes I know off the top of my head, it's usually drug disputes. It's usually a gang thing. If it's neither of those, it could be a number of other reasons, but the biggest one is either mental health or just pure evilness. And that's pretty much it. Ideology doesn't really have a lot to do with 14-year-olds stabbing each other, as far as I can tell. It's more just the fact that they're naturally violent, and we do not have enough law and order in this country to, well, let people know that that's going to be the end of their lives if they do. I expected to be confronted by anger and aggression. What I didn't expect was to quickly grasp the attraction of the so-called manosphere. As a man, you should probably understand why there's an attraction to it. I knew almost immediately that if I was an isolated kid, I would find answers as to why I felt a bit lost. One of the central ideas that 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men would have made Adolescent be sit up and frankly nod. Yeah, it's because it's true, and everyone sees it. I'm not being funny, but, I was not in that 20% of men when I was younger. Literally every boy who struggles to get girls knows this is true, because it's most of the boys. The path then becomes, what do you do to upset that equation? How do you manipulate and harm in order to reset a female-dominated world that works against you? If you believe one part of the logic, the other half becomes conducive. Well, not necessarily. Think Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson constantly goes on about the Pareto distribution. He does not say that you need to do anything about that equation. What he says is, well, do your best to try and be in that 20%. And that's largely what my outlook on life has been. Just become a competent man. That's the best thing you can do. But unfortunately, the entire system of growing up, including the education system, is quite scared of competent men, and in fact says, don't do that, because you end up, with war and things like that, which, well, have we avoided war by trying to feminise the entire world? Not particularly. The only episode Stephen left me alone with was episode 3. He said to write a two-hander that looked into Jamie's mind. Writing it, I was shocked at how much of Jamie I had in me. His pain, his anger, contained sides of me I didn't want to see. He comes from a good background like me, he's a bright boy like I was. But the key difference between us, he had the internet to read at night, whereas I had Terry Pratchett and Judy Blume. I mean, a bit of a cringe last line, but it is interesting that he wrote Jamie as if it was himself as a 14-year-old. Genuinely probably what kept that episode quite engaging. Jamie's not a simple product of the manosphere, he's a product of parents that didn't see, a school that couldn't care, and a brain that didn't stop him. I thought we weren't blaming the parent here. Either way. Yes, those are actually generally 3 issues that we actually have. The parents in the show obviously did care. The problem is that in real life, there are parents that literally just do not care. You know, you have kids going to school these days that can't even go to the toilet, can't even read, didn't have parents who read to them. Jamie was clearly someone in the show whose parents did care for him and did try with him, but obviously they wrote a character who still went stabbing. Put 3,000 kids in the same situation and they wouldn't do what he did, yet spend any time on forums on 4chan or Reddit, spend any time on most social media platforms, and you end up quite quickly in some dark spaces. Luckily, mine's one of the lighter ones. Parents can try and regulate it, schools can stop mobile phone access, but more needs to be done. There should be government support because the ideas being expressed are dangerous and in the wrong hands, and young brains aren't equipped to cope with them. Again, they will do things like this and then, frankly, not do anything about other ideas that might be spread in some other religious institutions, let's say. Just crazy work here, really. My son is almost 9. In 2 years' time, he will be begging me for a smartphone. By that point, 60-70% of his class will have phones. Do I say no and isolate him? Can I put controls in? But I'm not digitally sophisticated. My 12-year-old nephew already runs rings around me. I have seen what he could see, and I don't know how to stop him seeing it. I know how I'm in the same position as hundreds of thousands of parents worrying about these things. You can actually contact your internet service provider to ban websites from your own Wi-Fi system. You could do that, but again, he probably doesn't know that, to be fair. So after going through the smartphone ban at school and how the government watered it down, Thorne says, if it was my decision, I would be talking of smartphones like cigarettes and issuing an outright ban on all use by under 16s, but if that isn't possible, the digital age of consent is a fine alternative. In Australia, social media companies will be liable for fines up to 25 million if they do not systematically stop children younger than 16 from holding accounts. In France and Norway, there are restrictions up to 15. We need to do something similarly radical here. And to be fair, as far as I'm aware, you can still be anonymous in Australia, France and Norway, so maybe Britain won't go as far as to ban anonymous accounts. What you hope when you make a piece of social realism is to create a conversation. We want to make something that people want to watch, of course, but we also wanted to pose a question that got people talking on their sofas in pubs and schools, maybe even in Parliament, and apparently on YouTube. This show is a tragedy. Yeah, Katie's loss is the apex of that tragedy, but I hope it's okay to say Jamie is a tragedy too. We will not solve the problem by kicking this issue into long grass. This requires urgent action, and I hope the government is brave enough to reconsider it. And again, it's hollow fifth order effects they're going after. It's symptoms of the larger problem, which is the masculinity crisis. Oh, what's the problem with Andrew Tate? Don't really know, just ban boys from even being able to see him. I don't think that's necessarily going to have the outcomes that you are desiring. And again, it's not even like it's a bad idea to ban smartphones for under 16s. The reason actually I want it banned for under 16s isn't because of the access to the internet sort of thing. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is because it absolutely exacerbates, well, feminine bullying, frankly. You know, there have been plenty of girls pushed to suicide because of the bullying that can happen on social media. That's the reason I'd do it. It's not really anything to do with boys, to be quite honest with you. The boy thing's frankly a much wider societal issue that, again, well, even my own mother has started questioning whether feminism was the right decision. It's not like my mum was ever such a massive feminist. She's, put forward talking points to me before, sure, but clearly she's seen consequences that make her think, maybe all this get women in the workplace stuff and effectively blur the line between man and woman for a lot of people in terms of their roles in society probably wasn't a great idea. And I would happen to agree. Anyway, in a subsequent interview on the BBC, Jack Thorne started saying this: I've had a lot of response from people I haven't heard from in years telling me about conversations they're now having with children, and that's really gratifying. My son's head teacher stopped me at the school gates to say I'd like to talk to you about this, and I'd like to think about what our school can do and what our schools can, other schools can do. The conversation seems to have been starting in all sorts of different places. I mean, this is the main thing that's happened is everyone's talking about the show. We're not going to get any decent answers, and as I say, a lot of normies seem to be catching on that. I don't think banning phone in schools is actually going to solve this. This seems actually a lot deeper, which is really ironic because, as I say, the show is trying to get at something deeper than just smartphones need to go. And basically nobody who's actually being talked to about it wants to talk about anything deeper. It's really weird. Chief among them are social media and the influence of incel ideas, which encourage men to blame women for their lack of relationships and opportunities. And again, it's just... Again, they wrote episode 2 to effectively say female teachers suck at controlling and disciplining boys, and not only that, but girls bully boys by using the term incel. You know, it's weird to call Thorne an incel, and in the show they make it clear that it is just a slur, but outside of the show they're all saying, oh yeah, he's an incel. It's like, of course he is, he's 13. But the drama which Thorne created with actor Stephen Graham is not just pointing the finger at incel culture. I really hope this is a drama that suggests that Jamie is like this because of a whole number of complicated factors. Now, they don't really go into natural violent tendencies either. I mean, they kind of do with the psychoanalyst episode, but that's about as far as it goes. It's never really directly addressed. Anyway, he then goes into solutions and starts saying that... starts saying that Gareth Southgate is amazing, but he believes the solution is about more than having better role models. Gareth Southgate isn't the greatest role model you could probably put forward for boys. Gareth Southgate, while he made a decent England team, always fumbled the bag at the end, with pretty poor decisions in his management. That's just frankly the case. He's not a great manager, it's just international football isn't as competitive as it was. We've been having the conversation since I was a kid, the writer says. This has got to be the point where we do something a bit more radical than that. It's not about role models. Role models obviously can have a huge impact on people, but truthfully, we've got to change the culture, and that's that they're consuming, and that means by which our technology is facilitating this culture. This is exactly like people who complain about the free market. The culture, the technology facilitating the culture isn't the technology's fault. And again, to actually win a culture war, say, you really need to get the vibes on your side. You don't really have the vibes on your side when every side of this culture war agrees that boys stabbing other people is not a good thing. What are you doing uniquely that is going to change boys' mind? And not a lot better than people saying, well, obviously don't stab girls, but if you want to attract girls, just do the right thing, become more competent, do well in the things that you're good at, start any sort of project. Even doing Warhammer can attract girls. Look, if Henry Cavill can do nothing in interviews but talk about Warhammer and end up getting married with kids, literally anyone can do it. Okay, fair enough. Henry Cavill does have the physique of a Roman statue, so obviously the looks department need to help, but man, there's been memes on the internet of, people on YouTube saying what it's like to be ugly, and then they marry someone from the comments who said, actually, I think you're kind of cute, simply because they had a YouTube channel and had a project that they were interested in. And the best way that boys used to learn that was either through their fathers or through the men in the community. Well, boys are all online now because the community doesn't do as much as it used to, and if it does, then parents aren't taking their boys to it as much as they should. That's just the end-all and be-all of it. It was a really interesting speech, but I was hoping he was going to propose more radical things than he did. So what would those solutions be? Apparently it's banning the smartphones for under 16s and the ban of social media for people in the age of 16. That's all it goes into. That's the radical change. Again, fifth order effect of something that is actually quite a deep cultural and social issue that frankly these people don't want to talk about properly. Why are boys so disillusioned? Don't know, just take their smartphones off them. You gotta give them something else for entertainment then. I mean, listen, he said before that, I wasn't on social media when I was younger. I had Pacha instead. Yeah, I'm not being funny, but one, not many boys your age were reading books. I want to throw that out. Reading as a pastime is actually quite rare and has been even before the age of TV and the internet. And the second thing is, as I just mentioned, you're going to take the smartphones off these kids. Okay, maybe only in school. Maybe for all kids under 16 they can't have a smartphone at all. Maybe that might even be better. But as I say, my issue with smartphones, and I agree with taking it off kids under 16, is it's more so that girls don't bully each other into suicide and self-harm. It's less so because boys are going to be accessing all sorts of things on the internet that maybe they shouldn't. Because to be frank with you, a lot of boys would probably be largely the same as they are now, even without Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is just kind of reflecting back their own thoughts at them in a way, and yes, corrupting them to some extent as well. But the boys would corrupt each other anyway. It's a bit of an odd one. So, again, we're talking about radical action, but your radical action is to do things that Australia, Norway, and France have done already anyway. And that, from what I can tell, I mean, I don't follow crimes in these countries as much as maybe I should to make this comment, but I don't think it's made any radical difference in knife crime. And so maybe the issue is actually a bit deeper than we're looking at. Anyway, I want to finish this video off because I touched on this last time, but I really need to remind the online right. Going on about race throughout this whole thing is a complete red herring. And actually going through what we've been through, I think you should actually be using this to try and push, oh yes, actually, English boys are having a massive issue here, we should probably talk about it. Instead, oh no, now people are going to think knife crime and white boy. Or which I'm just going to throw out there, I don't think it's true. I think people understand that this is a drama, and even the writers themselves said, we can't find motivation for someone who has a good family here. And it took them a while and had to be suggested by a woman to look into incel culture, and then frankly, they barely even touch on it properly. Anyway, here's Jack Thorne talking about the whole race swapping thing.
The people who are saying, why was it the portrayal of a white boy who commits a knife crime when it's mostly black kids who commit knife crimes in this country? And that was a travesty, and it was just, kind of misleading.
And they've claimed that Stephen and I based it on a story or another story, and so they're saying that we race swapped it because we were basing it on here and then it ended up there and everything else, and nothing's further from the truth.
I've been willing to believe them on this. You actually listen to what they say whenever they bring up the knife crime things. They always bring up that there was a stabbing in Liverpool and we don't know the kid because he's under 18 and reporting restrictions. Liverpool, however, is 80-odd% white, so I'm willing to believe it was a white kid. And, well, I mean, Stephen Graham grew up in Liverpool. He will have been surrounded by white people. And so that would have been his assumption too. And yes, in the South, the other one they talk about, it was a black guy who stabbed a girl. And yes, there is an awful lot of knife crime from black people. However, the reason that I'm willing to go even further and say, yeah, I don't think race even came into their minds is because, as we read before, Jamie was a self-insert for Jack Thorne. And so that's probably a better reason for why he was white, because one, he's talking about an issue that frankly seems to be a more, let's say, white-coded than black-coded issue, which is the whole incel thing. Not even that the boy in the show is necessarily an incel, I don't really care about that. But clearly the show was talking about it, and how we have a crisis of masculinity, and that of course affects all boys, but it is, let's say, a more white-coded problem. And one that frankly I think we should be talking about properly than having these red herring arguments about, oh, why didn't you make the boy black? Do you think that's going to attract people to your argument, or do you think you're just going to look like screaming morons again?
That I have told a lot of real-life stories in my time. I know the harm that can come when you take elements of a real-life story and you put it on screen and the people aren't expecting it. There is no part of this that's based on a true story. Not one single part.
Again, I'm willing to believe all of this, to be quite frank. I think what's even funnier about that, though, is the fact that they are then using this to say, oh yes, but this is talking about very, very real issues. That's the funny part. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Oh, this is based on very, very real crimes. Oh, but we made the whole thing up. Oh, and we are demanding policy from this as well. You're demanding policy from a completely fictional story? That seems a bit mad. And yet, again, at the same time, the Labour government is refusing a national inquiry into very, very real crimes that happened all over the country and were way worse than this, frankly.
That it should have been a black boy.
Yeah.
Well, it's absurd to say that this is only committed by black boys. You know, like, it's absurd. It's not true. And history, you know, shows a lot of cases of kids from all races committing these crimes.
Again, yes, he's right, and yes, you know, don't worry, online right. I also know that, yes, there is a disproportionate amount of non-white boys committing these crimes. I am well aware of that. A lot of them aren't particularly doing it for general misogyny, though. To be honest, I don't think most white boys are doing it for that either. What we're seeing here is actual problems being brought up for teenage boys of, frankly, all races, but it's affecting white boys as well. And the online right basically trying to pretend that actually this entire show is trying to make them out to be the most evil people possible, and there's nothing like that in the show. It's a self-victimizing narrative, and I frankly think it's pathetic.
We're not making a point about race with this. We are making a point about masculinity. We're trying to get inside a problem. We're not saying this is one thing or another. We're saying this is about boys.
Yeah, again, I'm just willing to believe him on this. I said it in the last video. They seem to try and make it as colourblind as they could, and I know I'm still going to get comments saying, oh, but mostly black boys do it. Yes, I know, I don't care. You've been given a gift of a show, a little bit like Starship Troopers, as I said before, that is actually kind of making a lot of points that we make. You know, there's female bullying of boys to an extent that's been exacerbated by social media. There has been a complete breakdown of the understanding of, well, boys' place in the world. There has been total feminization of schools to the point where we're not educated very well, and unfortunately all these people are going to be winning the conversation, because all an awful lot of people can be bothered to talk about is, oh, well, it should have been a black boy. No, what you are doing is once again ceding ground to the left. In a lot of ways, the right deserve to lose. On this point, this is just the online right, to be fair. But on this point, the best thing you can probably do is say, why the hell are you making policy based on fictional stories and not focusing on very real issues and very real stories that we can see in newspapers all the time? And then let's look at the much wider problems, which is, well, education's not as good as it was. You know, frankly, some boys need a caning in school. A load of other points I've made loads of times in the past. I don't need to list them all off, because I think with that, we're done for today. So, another decent one on Adolescence. It's once again absolutely crazy how this show is taken off to the point where the government feels like they're doing something just by talking to the writers of this show, who they themselves don't really have the answers to any of this. The only answers he had was ban smartphones. Great, well done. Not a positive vision, as I say, but I don't think it's possible for him to have a positive vision. He is quite clearly quite a bit leftist after all. But he wrote a good show if you look at it in isolation. It's just a shame everything else around it has kind of ruined my appetite for it. Anyway, as I say with that, it's the end of the show. So tonight it is Tosh Talks. We are going to be talking about how to get normies on side, and I think Adolescence is going to be a good springboard for that, so we'll look into it. As for other streams, it's Laughing at the Guardian on Saturday, so do look forward to that. And of course, videos out as and when I can make them. If you want to help out the channel, subscribe, like, comment, give me money, become a member, all that good stuff. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.